our sons, this day have set upon a mighty endeavor.
A day that changed the war.
The water was over my head.
A day of sacrifice.
Was there a time you thought, I may not make it out of here?
A day that turned young men into heroes. Tonight, 70 years later, WRAL honors local veterans. A mighty endeavor. WRAL remembers D-Day.
It was June 6, 1944, the largest seaborne invasion in history, and the cost was great, enormous. Thousands of troops killed. However, so was the eventual victory. And tonight, we join the world in honoring the heroes of D-Day. Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm David Crabtree. Today, along the coast of France where the invasion unfolded, world leaders, veterans who were part of the invasion, and their admirers gathered to salute the bravery and sacrifice of the troops on that day. And in Bedford, Virginia, scores of World War II veterans gathered at the National D-Day Memorial. We'll have a live report from there in a moment. Now, those veterans are in Raleigh tonight for a welcome home ceremony taking place at Dorton Arena. This is video from just a short time ago. Sky 5 was over the caravan of buses as they were escorted by Rolling Thunder, the group dedicated to helping Americans of all wars, leading their way on their motorcycles. And take a look at this. This is what they've just arrived to at Dorton Arena. You can't watch this without getting chills. They're the veterans, their families, their supporters, thousands of people inside Dorton Arena tonight. They are there to welcome home the veterans who made their way to Bedford, to the World War II Memorial, and we will have a live report coming up from inside Dorton Arena in just a moment. However, in order to understand the significance of this day, you have to understand what was happening in World War II 70 years ago today.
June 1944. Nazi Germany controlled most of Western Europe. Allied forces, led by General Dwight D. Eisenhower, decided to open a second front. The invasion had three phases. First, more than 15,000 paratroopers jumped behind enemy lines to block roads and bridges leading to the coast. Then thousands of planes bombarded the coast, creating craters for Allied troops to use as shelter. Finally, more than 100,000 Allied troops and 30,000 vehicles stormed the beaches of Normandy. Not everything went as planned. Problems in executing the invasion contributed to more than 9,000 Allied troops being killed or injured. However, the surviving servicemen liberated France and ultimately marched across Europe and defeated Hitler.
Today's D-Day commemoration in France may be the most significant yet. It's most likely the last one a large number of veterans who served in the invasion will attend, as that generation is slowly dying away. A magnificent setting, 21-gun salute, taps, the crowd watching in silence, F-15s ultimately roaring overhead of the American cemetery. President Obama asking veterans to raise their hands so they could be recognized for their service.
These men waged war so that we might know peace. They sacrificed so that we might be free. They fought in hopes of a day when we no longer need to fight. We are grateful to them.
President Obama and the French president laid a wreath and greeted some of the veterans there. With each year that passes, fewer and fewer D-Day veterans are alive to tell their magnificent stories. Today, many made a pilgrimage to the National D-Day Memorial in Bedford, Virginia. WRAL's Brian Mims is there tonight. Brian, I know you have been looking forward to this day just to hear more of the stories. It had to be incredibly emotional for everyone involved.
Unquestionably, David, you couldn't help but have your eyes moisten when looking out on all those veterans who have lived long enough to tell their harrowing stories to our generation. This is one of the most beautiful monuments to our war heroes you'll ever see. Cradled by mountains, it stands so imposingly, much like that noble show of force 70 years ago.
A little bit surprised to be here.
The memories don't weaken with age. They're still as stark as a C-47 silhouetted against a Blue Ridge sky. Young men from Apex and Goldsboro and Lumberton jumped out of C-47s into the death trap of Normandy. Edward Isbell was among the first paratroopers in on 6 June 1944. The Nazis held him prisoner for a year. 93 years old, it still hurts to think back on all the buddies he lost in battle.
Yeah, it sure is. You don't get over it.
Robert Ivy also entered Normandy by parachute.
I told my family that I didn't ever swear to come back. But I did. I was lucky enough to.
These men weren't all storming the beaches and hedgerows. Some, like Edwin Braswell, were on bombing missions over Russia, trying to keep Hitler from sending reinforcements. That was your role?
That was my role.
And that was a big role?
That was a big role. And I wound up with 41 combat missions. None of them were ever easy.
He ended up being shot down. He ended up, too, as a prisoner of war. Can you believe it's been 70 years? 70 years?
No, it's hard to think it's been 70 years. They've just flown by.
70 years later, they're here to take in this mighty monument to the warriors of D-Day. A granite arch looms as the Golden Knights plunge. The old warriors now salute and sing to Old Glory. Charles Powell, who enlisted at the end of the war, being here on this day, well,
I can't explain it. It's marvelous.
This grand monument is here because of the Bedford Boys. 19 young men from this small town died on D-Day, the highest per capita of any community in the country. And David, more than 4,000 Allied troops were killed on that day 70 years ago.
It's remarkable to see it. It's remarkable to see that memorial as well. Brian Mims reporting live in Bedford. Brian, thank you. Now, the 75 veterans from our area who just were in Bedford last night and today just arrived at Dorton Arena at the State Fairgrounds. That's where the local campaign called Operation Omaha is holding a welcome back ceremony, and they're already having a great time. WRAL's Adam Owens is live inside Dorton Arena with this big celebration. Adam?
David, we do not have the technology and television yet to convey the emotion in Dorton Arena right now. Some of these veterans that are just returning from that moment at the National Memorial earlier today are returning to a huge moment here back home in Raleigh, this massive homecoming which hundreds of people turned out to. And we watched the veterans after their buses pulled into Dorton Arena to crowds and cheers and the band playing in the background. And one by one, David, they walked off those buses, turned the corner, saw those waving flags, saw those people cheering for them, and you could see the tears well up in their eyes, almost as if they didn't expect it. But you talk to the people in this crowd here, and they wouldn't have it any other way. They wanted to be here because they appreciate the sacrifice here, because many of them have a connection to the military themselves and understand what their families must have gone through and the hard work that they are responsible for, that, you know, help to make this country great. And you really do feel glad to be an American standing in this room. We even saw a student earlier from Broughton High School. He's one of the people playing in the band, but walked down with a picture he had drawn of the D-Day landing, and he is walking, a young man walking to each veteran and kindly asking them if they will sign the picture that he drew. There are just so many small moments in this very big moment that it's just incredible out here, David. Back to you.
What amazing insight from that teenager as well. Adam Owens live at Dorton Arena. We'll have more from Dorton Arena later. But in the meantime now, just say the name Normandy and the powerful reminder of the thousands killed in that invasion. Next, we take you here to the American Cemetery, the final resting place for the heroes.
This country came together like it's never come together again. God laid his hand on us, and I'm thankful to that.
D-Day memories from local veteran Ed Chappell, who spoke with us back in 2009. His boat was part of the first wave onto the shores of Normandy 70 years ago. The Normandy American Cemetery and Memorial serves as permanent salute to the bravery and sacrifice of all the Allied troops. CBS reporter Jerika Duncan spent her day there, and earlier I spoke with her about how well the French treat D-Day veterans and their families.
Well, it's a very welcoming feeling. Even looking at the headstones, you'll see that the American flag and the French flag are side by side. And just talking to people here in this area in Normandy, you get a sense that people are extremely grateful for what the Allied forces did. Not only people who experienced it during that time, but some of the young people who treat these veterans like rock stars. They want to take pictures with them. So it's really a fabric of the culture here. People know that Normandy changed the way we live, changed the way that we see the world, and changed the world for better.
You know, Jerika, I was there just about 5 or 6 years ago, and looking at the American Cemetery behind you there, it is such a reverent place, such a place of peace. Television does it justice, but it cannot do it justice because of the magnitude of the space and the silence there. What was it like for you on this day in particular to spend time where you are?
It's amazing. I have never been to Normandy. This was my first time. You hear about World War II and D-Day, you read about it, but to experience it, to talk to several veterans who were here, who are very coherent and with it, if you will, and can tell you stories about what they went through. It's very difficult for them, but it's quite amazing. And when you do talk about setting the scene, you see all of these crosses, but what you don't see is that Omaha Beach overlooks the cemetery. The cemetery overlooks Omaha Beach, and as you probably know, that was a very deadly and bloody battle there at Omaha Beach. About 3,000 people lost their lives on D-Day. So this is not really necessarily doing it justice, but as you said, it really is an amazing sight to see. And it is a place where people come to kind of stroll through here and pay their respects.
Yeah, it's very humbling. And we appreciate your time there. Jerika Duncan from CBS News reporting live from the American Cemetery at Normandy. Jerika, thank you. Well, members of Fort Bragg's 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions participated in this year's commemorations. They boarded C-47s, parachuted into Normandy, exactly where enemy fire awaited troops 70 years ago. Now, the 440th Airlift Wing at Pope Army Field has direct ties to the invasion. A C-47 aircraft dropped elements of the 101st Airborne Division into France. And 20 years ago, former WRAO news anchor Charlie Gaddy was in Normandy. When we come back, Charlie's reflections on the trip and why it's more important than ever we all learn about D-Day. WRAO's longtime news anchor and our good friend Charlie Gaddy was in Normandy 20 years ago this night. He was there covering the 50th anniversary of D-Day. And on this night, he reflects on that trip and the importance of never forgetting what happened that day.
Omaha Beach, quiet, picturesque, serene.
It's kind of haunting. It was to me. That's the only way I can describe it.
But on June 6, 1944, the sound of artillery would replace the sound of those crashing waves.
I'm thinking as I'm standing there and the waves are washing up, I'm thinking, this is the place. This is where so many young people gave everything for our liberties.
The sand would turn red with the blood of Allied soldiers. And the people of this part of France would have true heroes for life.
The story that was so poignant to me, the one that was told us by the French lady, she was a teenager on June the 6th. Something awakened her. She went to the window and pushed the blinds open, and then she saw paratroopers landing on her lawn. And she said she dropped to her knees with thankfulness because she knew they were being liberated.
50 years later, the people still love them.
When they pulled in there in those tour buses, the sidewalks were lined with people, all of them waving little American flags.
The people in Normandy will tell you that they owe their freedom and their lives to the Americans.
They have never forgotten.
There's a better on the way.
Then we saw the John Steele Bar. This was the 82nd Airborne kid whose parachute got caught on that famous church steeple.
He pretended to be dead. The Germans shot him in the foot, later found he was alive and captured him.
We went to the John Steele Bar and had a beer. The first time I saw that military U.S. D-Day cemetery, it just takes your breath, doesn't it? Just takes your breath.
This was my aid station flag.
First-hand accounts of D-Day, better get them fast because those memories are dying with those men.
Charlie, we thank you for that. Again, that's Charlie Gaddy, longtime news anchor here at WRAL when he was in Normandy 20 years ago tonight. Now we're going to go back to the state fairgrounds because it's the site of a major ceremony honoring local veterans. WRAL's Adam Owens is live inside Dorton Arena where the excitement and appreciation continues. Adam?
David, there's a lot of handshaking, there's a lot of hugging going on. There's just a lot of excitement, and it's a very, very emotional scene here. Not too terribly long ago, these three buses you see in Dorton Arena here at the fairgrounds pulled through a large opening in Dorton Arena. I was just told by one of the veterans, one of the 75 veterans returning from Virginia, where they were at services, the D-Day services, they told me that when they were pulling in the arena, they were told just to expect a reception. When they finally realized what was going on and looked up into the crowd of hundreds cheering and waving American flags, they say that the emotion was overwhelming inside of these buses. And there are a lot of incredible stories being shared here, not only stories of their experiences earlier today with all the memorial services, but experiences about coming back together and a lot of appreciation being shown here. David.
Very good. Adam Owens reporting live there in Dorton Arena. Adam, thank you. Now, when Willie Williams arrived in Normandy, he didn't think he would survive the next battle. Up next, he shares his story and the memories that still haunt him 70 years later. I recently had the privilege of learning one veteran's story firsthand. He fought and survived many battles. The first was in Normandy, where he joined the fight on day 2 of the invasion.
We was in,
Around this Army veterans' house in Franklinton are reminders. A certificate from President Truman, a cap, sand from Omaha Beach. However, the most profound memories of war are inside the mind and heart of 93-year-old Willie Williams.
Yeah, you think about all that stuff. I tell you, you go crazy, too, if you think about it too much.
Williams hit Omaha Beach D-Day +1, June 7th, 1944. The Allies had taken the beach, yet miles away, the Germans were still firing.
What did you see on the coastline?
I couldn't see too much or nothing right where they were shelling so bad. You see where a shell hit here and yonder in the water.
Finally on shore, he saw the first of the 35 young men the small town of Bedford, Virginia would lose.
First guy that I saw dead was one of them laying that side of the road with that 29th Division patch on there and blood running out of his ear down his face. It done got dry on there.
You see, Williams was the messenger. By walkie-talkie, he kept his platoon in touch, in step with headquarters. The fighting was intense.
Yeah.
And you were under fire.
That's right, yeah.
And you're 23 years old.
Yeah.
Was there a time you thought, I may not make it out of here?
Oh, yeah, you do it every one while, and you get up in the morning and say you made it through one more day. one more day. Thank the Lord, one more day.
He made 54 days at Normandy, then on to 3 more battles. Yet Normandy is the place he remembers most and is still haunted by those memories. 10 years ago, Willie Williams returned to Omaha Beach, the hell of war still evident in his mind.
I walked up there kind of by myself and looked back out across there. It's something. I'm sorry. What the people just don't know what to go through with it up there.
Williams is proud of his service. Humility has kept many of the memories inside. And he finished our talk with this stark message of war.
It's all real, though. There won't no ifs and ands and buts about it. It was real.
And it's men like Willie Williams who we are saluting tonight. In fact, he made the trip up to Bedford, Virginia. So let's take you with another live look now at Dorton Arena here in Raleigh, where they are celebrating the homecoming of D-Day veterans from their trip to that national memorial in Bedford, Virginia. Broughton High School band is there. The sponsors that were part of the trips, of course, are with them. People of all generations out to thank this group known as the greatest of generations. And we thank you for joining us to honor the valor and sacrifice that changed the course of history, world history. And we leave you with a clip of the address President Roosevelt gave the night of the invasion. He led the nation in a prayer he wrote himself for the success of the mission and the safety of our troops.
For these men are lately drawn from the ways of peace. They fight not for the lust of conquest. They fight to end conquest. They fight to liberate. They fight to let justice arise and tolerance and goodwill among all thy people. They yearn but for the end of battle, for their return to the haven of home.